Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you joined us today. And I am so excited to introduce you to Emily Hage. Yep. Emily is the CEO of First Call, which is a organization that works with families and individuals who are dealing with substance use disorder. Yep. And so I'm so excited to have Emily here. My good friend Tom Langhofer is the one that said, hey, you need to interview Emily. And some of you who follow me have, it's been a few months, but I interviewed Tom not too long ago. And so thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Emily,
thanks for asking.
Here. Yeah. Let's, I always like to get background story, like where you were born, where you grew up, kind of your early influences with your family and all of that.
I was born in Naperville, Illinois, so like the suburbs of Chicago. And my mom is from northern Minnesota, Duluth, Minnesota. My dad is from northern England, and they met at an AA meeting in downtown Chicago. And, about 8 months later, my brother was born. So rest is history. And so we lived in the Chicago area.
Is your brother older?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He's 3 years older than me.
Okay.
So we lived in Chicago, and then my mom really wanted, she's one of 6 kids, and she's the only one that's not in Minnesota still. So my dad asked for a transfer, and he got transferred to Kansas City instead of Minneapolis. So that wasn't really the plan, but my mom only punished him for like 15 years. She was not a big fan of the move, but we moved here when I was in first grade. So this is kind of, for all intents and purposes, my hometown.
Which high school did you go to?
I went to Olathe South.
Oh, wow.
And
we just interviewed Sarah Morgan, who's a country singer who went to Olathe South.
Oh, what was her? I wonder what her maiden name was.
I've interviewed Calvin Arsenia, who went to Olathe South, who's a musician, singer, songwriter, harp player, African American guy.
Okay, I don't know that person.
But anyway, yeah, so interesting.
A lot of jewels.
We're going to have to.
That's what people say about South Olathe. Just really creeps them out.
Olathe South in our anyway.
Yeah, so we moved to, and at that point, like where we moved in Olathe was kind of the end of the earth, and now it's, there it just goes forever.
I had a nephew who played basketball at Mid-American Nazarene.
Yeah, so I lived like a mile from there.
Okay,
yeah.
All-American, and so I was down there at watching him play basketball quite a bit. So that was my foray into that part of town.
Yeah, so I was super involved in. I played soccer competitively. That was kind of the thing I did. But was very involved in high school with student council and all different types of things. I kind of had a lot of different friends, but my senior year of high school was kind of tough. We lost a very dear friend in a really tragic car accident, and my friend group, I just was ready to go. So I applied for colleges that were anywhere but here, and that's when I moved to Minneapolis for school.
Okay. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
So it's kind of layered. My parents have 3 kids. So I have a younger sister, me, and then an older brother. And the 3 of us are very, very good, close friends. But my dad had been married twice before this marriage. So I have a half brother in California. And then I have 2 half siblings in England who I had never met until... So I was 25, I think, when I met my brother, Paul. And we knew that he existed, and we knew that was like a really painful chapter in my dad's life. But, he connected like with one of my uncles in England on Facebook, and that's how he found my dad. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Kind of random and wild.
So I'm curious, because obviously this ties into your work that you're doing today, but your parents met in an AA group in Chicago.
They did.
Dad from England, your mom's from Minnesota.
Yeah.
They meet in a Chicago AA group. And have they stayed sober all these years?
They have stayed sober for 40 years.
Gosh.
So it's
congratulations, Mom and Dad. If you listen to this, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's the biggest gift, I think. Their recovery was very much at the center of our home, for better or for worse. Like, that wasn't always easy, and there were moments that were healthier than others, but at the end of the day, they never drank I've never seen my parents drink or use drugs, which is a miracle.
Yeah. And so AA talk, like AA has its kind of almost own lingo.
Sure do, yeah.
You know, like the big book is it's like the Bible, you know, and like the 12 and 12. It's just got this whole lingo, which as a pastor, I was always supportive of people going to AA, but I didn't really know it. I think maybe one time I read the big book quickly, like 20 years ago as a pastor, not ever, just kind of wanting to have a feel for what it was all about.
That's cool.
But that was it. And I'd refer people there, and I was happy people were there.
Yeah, it's kind of like just this own
But I just didn't know
entity.
really anything about it until now. Now.
Yeah, right.
My last 2.5 years, it's been a place that I've worked in the 12-step world now for about 2.5 years. So did you grow up with that kind of language and talk around the house?
Well, and I didn't even realize the extent until I started working at First Call. It was my first job out of grad school. So I was young, like 24. And
let's tell what First Call is. I mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, but
that it's a ministry. It's an organization here, nonprofit organization in Kansas City. Is it local only? Is it Kansas City based?
We're Kansas City. We were an affiliate organization on the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, which is no longer a thing. So we disaffiliated with the national organization in 2008 as the agency's direct services grew. But our mission is to reduce the impact of alcohol, drugs, and addiction by providing quality resources to individuals, families, and the community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
But let's circle back to, so you didn't realize how much language, AA language was in the house until you started working for First Call.
And I would hear these little things and I'd be like, my mom says that, or when we were feeling overwhelmed or anxious, or her go-to was making a gratitude list. Just all these little things that I think were very beneficial tools to use as a parent. I thought they were ours. And then, talking, because First Call has typically many people who work at the agency are in recovery themselves. And so, you kind of start hearing these little, keep it simple, stupid, all these little things. You're like, what the? My parents say that. And I felt a little...
Your best thinking got you here.
Yeah.
And
well, I felt a
one
little
day at a time.
robbed.
Wow, I thought that was our little cool family thing.
Yeah. So it was funny. I think working where I do, it's good context because, we can all get frustrated or have feelings about the family we grew up in, but it helps keep me centered on, there's been turmoil. Every person has had that. But at the end of the day, my life has been fruitful, beautiful. And I think a lot of that is I didn't have to endure something I may have had to endure. Interesting.
Yeah. So, having, been in the 12-step world and worked in that now the last 2.5 years, I've become very familiar with the higher power approach to spirituality. Was that a part of your family, that approach to spirituality? Mm-hmm. Was there other faith-based? Did your parents have a faith background?
Yeah.
Was there?
My dad was raised Roman Catholic. like altar boy, very, very involved in church, in the Catholic Church. And my mom was raised Presbyterian, but going to church, that was part of both of their lives. And so when they got together, they landed on Lutheran. It was kind of like in the middle of what they both knew. So we were my brother, sister, and I, we all were raised and confirmed in the Lutheran Church. And that was, it never really felt like a chore, or it was just kind of a part of our lives. I definitely saw my parents seek a lot of comfort and refuge in church, and through the leadership of the church that we went to, like our pastors were, kind of counseled them through difficult chapters. And I think absolutely for them, their recovery, God is at the center of that. Yeah. And it kind of, has manifested differently throughout the years. So we went to church consistently in my childhood. They don't seem to go to church consistently now, but I know that their faith in God is still a, really centering force for them and a centering part of their program. So,
yeah. How's that influenced you?
I think I get it. It's not for me. I think, and we were kind of talking about it earlier. I do believe in kind of this cosmic, karmic, you kind of get what you give, and that they're, that law of attraction sort of thing. And so I don't know, that could be spirituality. I don't know what to call that, but I absolutely believe that you get what you give. But for me, it hasn't really, I don't feel supported in, like, I don't go to a church to have that affirmed in my life. That's affirmed for me through watching a lot of good people do beautiful things every day. It's affirmed in my work and in all the relationships that I have, and just really focusing on goodness. And sometimes I think that probably makes me a little bit of a Pollyanna. I'm definitely an idealistic person. But yeah, so I think it's kind of taken the theme that I grew up with. I don't necessarily think that you need to go to church to learn those lessons. I think that other people and the world itself can teach us if we're listening.
So goodness, beauty, creativity, love, grace, forgiveness, gratitude. Those are things that you really press into. Yeah,
I would like to think so. I mean, that was a very beautifully eloquent synopsis.
Well, it's part of, that's something I say, like, hey, even if there's not a God, this is the kind of person that I want to be, and the kinds of things that I want to press into. Yeah. And I'm not saying there's not a God. I'm just saying that even if there's not, well, with all the things that are in the world, I read science, I've been a Bible Jesus guy, but I read broadly, and there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much mystery to me that I think even if there's not a God, I still want to be this kind of person. Yeah.
And I agree. And I think that church for so many of us kind of gives, just like AA does though, it kind of gives you a roadmap of like, this is perhaps like a good way to lead your life. Like these are the key tenets that you want to abide by, or this, like showing love and respect to your neighbor. And I think, I've said that to people in my life in recovery a lot. Like I trust people that are in recovery, in a 12-step program, or doing whatever they do to take care of their recovery. Cause I know it's kind of like giving a roadmap. And so I think that's a gift. I think there's just a lot of ways to have the roadmap. Yeah. A lot of different roadmaps.
Yeah. And I think, the community part of it, is, there's something about having relationships that support you in those core values, those key beliefs that you hold to, and having community around that, and so I think there's value in that as well, however you find that community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and you see that, the beautiful thing about your work is that you see a lot of these things in action every day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. So how, did you have negative experiences with the church? I'm just curious.
No, I didn't personally have negative experiences with church. No, I went to the same church my entire life. The pastor that I grew up with married my husband and I. They've baptized. It's a husband and wife pastor duo. They baptized both my children. I love and respect those two people. No, I think as I've grown into adulthood, my pushback perhaps is on a more macro level of just, that we see people who are hurting more than others. And I think that there are examples of times where the church should be just acknowledging and welcoming. And I say the church like this. And I think sometimes religion has been used to hurt people. And I think that is the part that makes me distance, that has led me to distance myself, because I totally agree that, and I have many people in my life who get that beautiful sense of community, and it's opening and welcoming and inclusive. But there are lots of examples where it's not that way. And that is where I personally have a hard time, because I don't want my kids to see sanctioned exclusion. That's the antithesis of what I'd like them to be learning.
100%. The church throughout its history has been failed abysmally at living out some of Jesus's best teaching. And I mean, it's been the opposite sometimes of what Jesus is, in my view.
Well, sometimes I think it's just gotten a little political.
It does that. It gets judgy. It gets all kinds of things. And I hear you. I understand. How about your college experience? What you ended up going to the University of Minnesota. And tell me about
my college experience, well, like I said, I was running away a little bit because I just wasn't very happy in Olathe. My brother had moved to Chicago for his college, so he had been gone for a couple of years. That was hard too, because my sister and brother and I were kind of thick as thieves. My freshman year was brutal. Just I thought I was just really, really homesick. And my parents had a very hands-off parenting approach. I proved to have fairly good decision-making early, and so they left me alone. But when I came home from my freshman year of college, they sat down and they said, "You need to talk to a doctor. You're depressed. We're worried about you." So I went back my sophomore year under the agreement that I would stay another semester, and we would see how things were going. They were worried about me. So I started on antidepressants. That helped. I started learning how to breathe and manage my anxiety and acknowledge that that's something that I deal with. And I met my husband and the rest is history. So
did you meet at college?
Yeah.
At
our
University
sophomore year of college, we met.
Where is he from?
He's from the suburbs of Minneapolis. So, just a, redheaded Minnesota Viking kind of. But college was, growing up in Olathe, I did feel kind of on the outside of I wasn't, a Nazarene, or there were a lot of people who had a faith, that had a faith journey that was different than mine. I had political belief system that was different than most of my peers. That I started to really feel that my senior year of high school. But the other thing was, in high school, I think I was very thought that I was a popular person, and I'm very, I don't want to brag, but I'm very analytical. I'm very smart. And so I was in, AP classes, and I was the second in my class of like 470 people, but that's not what I wanted to be in high school. But when I went to college, I realized like that's who I was. And there were all these cool people who were the same, and just like really found my people. And that was awesome. I lived in the honors dorms with all the dorks and realized that I fit right in. So
funny. When I went to Baylor, I remember it's like everybody I met was a valedictorian, and I was like, how in the hell are there so many valedictorians in one place?
It was like a class of 10 people.
Yeah, then I started asking them, I said, well, how many were in your class? They'd go 15.
Yeah.
They'd like, oh, okay. Yeah. Because I was like, I don't know, I had 500 and something in my graduating class. And my best mate, my best man in my wedding was our valedictorian. So
that's cool.
So I kind of hung out with sporty people and the intellectual crowd as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So Minnesota was, you're going to college, like first off, University of Minnesota is the second biggest public university in the country. It's huge. And so all of a sudden I had this level of anonymity that I hadn't had in high school, because I was in the mix with everything in high school. And it was awesome. I just loved it. I loved all the things that I got to study, and just kind of doing whatever I wanted. It was the first time that I really realized, like, no one else is paying attention to you. Just do what you want.
What did you major in?
I double majored in political science and comparative literature. So,
was that a BA or BS?
Yes.
BA?
Yeah. Bachelor of Arts. Yeah.
And comparative literature in what field?
So cultural studies. So if I could go on about
some anthropology kind of stuff?
No, more like, maybe French literature. You take classes of French literature, or like literature, like reading books all about like the Quebecois people in Quebec, or just really strange classes, honestly. Like took a class all about suburbia, how that's come to be, how that shapes our society, or about how like science fiction literature has come to be, and like what's the canon of science fiction literature. The classes were so interesting. Wow. But it was I don't know what level of applicability there was. Right. Yeah. That was my filler in her.
But so it does sound like, even from an anthropology angle, you would read literature from various cultures. Yeah. So you're probably you weren't just getting, the top 100 books from the white Western world, but you were exploring all different from all cultures, probably from all kinds of time periods. And fun.
Yeah, it was cool. Like political science, I went into college with a ton of credits, and so it afforded me the opportunity to just take a class that was interesting. And so that was very much the comparative lit stuff. But I planned on working in politics. That was the plan. Okay. So that was the main study area. Yeah. And I did an internship for a congressman my junior year in DC. And
really?
Yeah. And I came back and I was like, you're way too nice for that.
Who did who did you intern for?
So this is like the person I interned for is a guy named Jim Ramstad. He was Minnesota's 3rd district for like 20 years. And he was the champion of mental health parity. So when I was there in 2007 is when the Mental Health Parity Act passed, which was the first federal legislation saying insurance companies need to treat mental health disorders the same way that you're treating physical disorders. So that was in 2007. It's 2022. It is still not being implemented properly. But my joke that I made with friends, because Ramstad's a Republican and I was a Democrat, and I was like, I believed so deeply in what he was trying to do. His co-sponsor was Patrick Kennedy, who's still a huge champion in our field. But Ramstad was in long-term recovery and, just trying to make a positive impact.
That's cool.
It was cool, but it was like harsh.
Once you got in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then there was the huge recession. So I graduated college in 2008 and, thought I would work in government but there were hiring freezes. And so I was planning to go to grad school and I went right away and got my master's in public policy at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
So I just decided to keep on going to school.
Public policy.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like applied political science. So public policy. So I studied nonprofit management. So it's very similar to a master's in public administration. So people that are working in the nonprofit or government sector. And it's essentially like an MBA, just focused on like the nonprofit sector. So more specialized really. Yeah. So you're learning about, I learned about all sorts of different, research and outcomes, but program evaluation and studied social policy. So kind of how to strengthen like the safety net. And so it's all kind of been one. When I look back, it's all been kind of like one path, really. So most of my peers from school were all doing the same thing. We're leading and working in nonprofit agencies.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
I've started 4 nonprofits. Spirituality Adventures is my 4th.
Okay.
The one was a church. One was a ministry to help support church growth. And then one was a music company to support artists that were in my church. And then this one is about helping, people grow spiritually, spiritual growth and transformation.
Yeah.
So 501c3s is First Call 501c3. Yeah.
Yep.
And so I know a little bit about that.
Yeah. I don't know much about, like, my mom has established a nonprofit. I am part of, First Call has been in the community since 1958. So I think it's probably a lot easier to step into a well-established nonprofit than do the heavy lifting at the beginning. So I commend you.
Yeah. So you went right from your studies in your master's to First Call?
Yeah.
And then you're still at First Call. Okay.
Yeah. 12 years ago.
All right. So how did that door open up for you?
My mom ran a small outpatient treatment agency in Olathe for substance use. And so she kind of knew, like, First Call has done professional development for people working in the field forever. So she was a little bit aware, and they had a job open. So, I kind of like lived at my parents' house for 4 months that summer. I went to the gym, I went to the pool. I applied for like 40 jobs. The job market was still that was 2010.
Okay.
So it took a little longer than I expected, but I applied for a very random job at First Call in the prevention department. That was like supporting tobacco retailers and not selling tobacco to minors. It was essentially like a big research project, but it was the kind of step in the door. And I've done like 6 different jobs there since.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
What are they? Jobs. Tell me the different jobs.
So I did that. That was like KCY. I couldn't even tell you what the acronym is, but the coordinator for that kind of grant funded project. And then I was the program coordinator for the agency's first federal grant. It was a technology grant. And then I was the director of quality assurance, and then the vice president of development, and now the president and CEO.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How long have you been the CEO?
For a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I worked very, very closely with Susan Whitmore, who's my predecessor. We were kind of the dynamic duo.
Okay.
For 5 years, 6 years. And she told me that she was going to tell me before she was quit.
Yeah.
But she didn't.
Okay.
I think COVID was just like so clarifying in so many ways. And so her family's all on the East Coast, and she was like, I got to go. Got to move to Vermont.
Wow.
So, but we had like a competitive hiring process. They had like over 70 applicants. And
wow.
So it was It was tough.
Wow.
Stressful.
That's cool though.
Yeah.
So let's dive into First Call. So it started in 58.
58. Yeah.
Who started it, and what was that early? What were those early days about?
Yeah, it was started by a woman named Marty Mann, who was very involved with the inception of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was called an NCA, National Council on Alcoholism, and really this express purpose was information referral for families, because Alcoholics Anonymous got established for the person dealing with alcoholism, but there was nothing, then the families were kind of just out of the loop. And so that was the impetus of the...
Probably before Al-Anon, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know when Al-Anon started, but...
right. It was just AA.
Yeah.
So, and like that information and referral is still the absolute backbone of what we do. So it's pretty cool. The organization has had a bunch of different names, kind of slowly evolved. So in the 80s, we went from being the NCA, but then we added DD, so National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. And in the 80s, like that was kind of a divisive shift, because there was stigma from alcoholics about people addicted to drugs. And, it was like just a kind of a sign of the times. But we've all settled, everything's settled. And I think people understand that alcohol use disorder and opioid use disorder and all, like, the symptomology is the same. And then I think in 2008, our name was too long. We were the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence of Kansas City. And so we changed our name to First Call Alcohol, Drug Prevention and Recovery. So who knows? But we usually just go by First Call.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. So, give us some rundowns on your main programs.
So I like to say we have programs for individuals, families, and the community. So I'll start with individuals. The 24-hour crisis call line, like I said, that information referral, that is still the backbone service that we offer. So
this be somebody in crisis that calls your hotline.
Yeah. Hey, I got pulled over. I need to get an assessment.
DUI thing
or hey, I think my husband is drinking too much. I don't know what to do.
Okay.
Or hey, I need to go to treatment. I don't know where to start.
Okay. So
the phone calls are wide, and a lot of times it's professionals calling from other organizations who just know they don't have the answer, but we will. Okay. And we love that type of collaboration and partnership. So that crisis call line, then we do standalone substance evaluations. Like I said, a lot of times those are court ordered, maybe someone's having some sort of custody issue, but a lot of times those are self-referred to, just someone who's ready to look at drinking or drug use that might be proving to be problematic.
Is that like a one-on-one interview?
Yeah. It's a pretty intensive service. It's usually probably 2 hours.
Okay.
We use a lot of validated tools to kind of get a feel of where someone is in terms of, and looking in a really comprehensive way, not just at substance use, but how's their health in every area of their life? Do they have a history with trauma? Are there mental health concerns? All of those things.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we can offer one-on-one recovery support to individuals too. So we'll do that broadly in the community. We have a lot of programming targeted at the reentry population. So working with criminal justice involved individuals as they try and navigate getting out of incarceration, maintaining their sobriety. It's really tricky. So those are individual services.
And you don't do temporary shelter, do you?
No, we don't do any housing.
Right. So do you do drug testing if somebody enters into your...
No.
Okay. Just curious.
I think the way we like to talk about, particularly for individuals, our services is we're filling gaps. And so most of the time we're doing care coordination for that person to connect them with, if they're in need of a more traditional treatment resource or housing or mental health services.
Right.
And so we call those people are recovery advocates. So they're really, sometimes they're working in a pretty short-term capacity with someone. We can stay engaged as long as the person desires and has a need.
Which rehabs do you partner with?
We work mostly with Jackson County. We have referral partnerships on both sides of the state line. The state line is complicating. It is a complicating factor.
Where are your offices?
We're right on State Line Road on the Missouri side.
On the Missouri side, okay.
So most often, we're working with the community mental health centers, Rediscover, Comprehensive, Truman, the large, for housing, just an array of partners, Benilde Hall, Welcome House, Healing House, and there are lots and lots and lots of smaller housing organizations.
Even Oxford, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it just depends on who, what the person needs and what the best fit is. But so that's a conversation that we try, all those are really person-centered recommendations. And then
do you guys do outpatient treatment?
The only place where we engage in an outpatient treatment program is for people who are involved with the Kansas City Municipal Drug Court, where we do a treatment program for those individuals. Okay. But otherwise, no.
Okay.
We're doing more it's really closer to an aftercare or relapse prevention model. We've talked about it to death, but we feel like the first call doing outpatient would be duplicative. There are a lot of high quality outpatient treatment programs, but finding the challenge is not, I think, the challenge is not the availability of the resources. It is knowing how to access them. And so we really focus on that piece. How do we get this person from point A to B? Because it's way, way, way more complicated than it should be.
Right. Yeah, and your brain's not working that great.
Yeah.
So to navigate all of that, you're not, your brain's typically not in the best place, right?
And it's
I'm talking about the person, the substance.
Yes, I totally get it. Yeah. I agree. And a lot of times, sometimes when we're talking directly with that person, oftentimes there's family members or other people involved. It's a totally different conversation, whether someone has insurance or if they don't. The majority of people that we're working with do not have insurance. So it's a pretty complicated web, and we're just trying to make it a little simpler. Yeah.
So what kind of, so you've got that immediate crisis thing, 24-hour hotline. Then you have an evaluation process. Then you have sort of this advocate person who basically is a networker and helping them to know, put out a step 1, 2, 3,
it's kind of,
networking kind of thing.
But it's someone who has training, some level of credentialing and expertise in supporting people with substance use disorder. And
so you kind of give them a lay of the land and maybe a process to go through.
Yeah.
And that's for the person, that's for the addict themselves. What programs do you offer for the family how does that work?
Yeah. So I think the family services that we offer are probably what First Call is best known for. Since the 70s, we've been doing a program called How to Cope. Well, in the 70s, it was called Tough Love. And that program is for adult individuals who are impacted by a loved one's substance use. So it doesn't need to be family, it's any type of relationship. And the premise is just a little different than the typical model, which is that the family gets support, but only once the loved one has decided to participate in some level of treatment, right? There's a family day. But what happens if that person never seeks recovery? And frankly, what we're working with families to kind of make a distinction of is you can't control what that person is doing. But in the meantime, their addiction is having a huge impact on you. And so we have that How to Cope program. It's a 3-week program. So it's a commitment. And then there's a companion program called Caring for Kids for Children.
Wow. So you're probably unpacking codependency issues and how to
restore balance
and boundaries, balance and boundaries, and whose responsibility is what, and then kids. Wow. So talk about that a little bit. What do you like? So I'm assuming you're talking about children of alcoholics, or is that what you're?
Most often, yeah. I mean, or someone living in a home, or, but even children who maybe are like in the child care welfare system now. I mean, the odds are, I think 80% of those kids have familial substance use. They have a myriad of risk factors that tell us they are at a very high risk for substance use disorder later in life. And so, as we've come...
What's the test that they've started doing on you? I know there's several of them, but that they start doing on...
The ACEs?
That's what... Yeah. What does that stand for? Adverse
Childhood Events. So...
Yeah. And then that you can almost predict things based on...
Yes, so it's kind of a trauma process, right? It's looking at childhood trauma. And so we can see, so in the example of those kids, like maybe they're not living in a home with that parent, but we know that they have addiction in their genetic history, plus they've experienced all of these, we call them ACEs.
Yes.
That puts that kid at just such a high risk of so much. I
had a friend I interviewed on here a year ago, probably, named Michelle Kylo, Dr. Kylo. She's worked a lot in this area. She was at Children's Mercy for almost 30 years working in this. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
It's been really revolutionary in helping because the things like, your parents getting divorced, that's an adverse childhood. So I think what's powerful about that tool is, any of these things on a standalone are kind of just feel kind of like normal, but the challenge is like, but if you have dealt with 5 of them, so some are kind of blaring, like, that's going to leave an impact, like watching a parent get high or something, but it's very interesting. And I think the thing about substance use prevention, which Caring for Kids is a very indicated substance use prevention program, is when you're talking to a 6-year-old, you're not necessarily talking about drugs and alcohol, but you're talking about resiliency and healthy decision-making, so that in 10 years, there's a little voice in that kid's brain, so it's a long game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do, that's our family services work. The programs are free. They're being held in person, virtual. So we're doing hybrid sessions. I can tell you that people who take those classes, there's so much praise and gratitude for that. And oftentimes Al-Anon can maybe be a little intimidating, or maybe you go to a group that doesn't feel like the right fit. But maybe after someone participates in how to cope, they have a better understanding of what's going on with them, the challenges that they have that they need to be vigilant about. It might make entry into a community support group like Al-Anon a little easier.
Great. Any other program you want to share with us?
Yeah. Well, we do. So the other hat we wear is we're the Prevention Resource Center through the state of Missouri for Jackson, Johnson, Lafayette, and Cass counties. So, that's a huge part of our work.
Is that an education approach?
It's more of an environmental strategy. We originally, the program was built to really support communities and community coalitions as they tackled priorities in their own communities. So, maybe there's a high schooler that dies in a drunk driving accident. And, those have proven to be very galvanizing events for a community. So a group of parents gets together. Well, where do we start? Then we have prevention specialists who can work with them to walk through kind of a process, like a framework. But we also do a lot of direct evidence-based prevention programming in schools. Tons and tons and tons of it. So
So middle schools, high school?
Elementary, middle, and high school.
Okay.
Yeah, the earlier the better, but usually we're starting in 4th grade.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's an education angle too, for sure, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the schools.
Yeah. So that's our direct services are really split kind of 50-50, prevention and recovery.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Do you have like a favorite story or two that kind of like inspirational that like kind of make your heart sing kind of a thing?
Oh, man. We hear it about how to cope. I mean, we hear those stories. I think just from a personal angle, we recently got we did a very intense research deep dive on all the data we have for that Caring for Kids program. So looking at 8 years worth of data, and we know that it increases a participant's knowledge about the harmful impact of substance use. But what the study showed us was that it's doing that, but it's also helping that child know that their parent's addiction isn't their fault, and that there are positive, healthy ways to cope with their feelings and all these things. And so for me personally, I mean, I never saw my parents drink or use drugs, but I did grow up in the home of 2 alcoholics. And so when I think about the things that these 6 to 13-year-olds are learning about something that will be part of their life forever, it makes me emotional because I wish I would have had that. It's taken me just growing up in therapy to understand, that for better or for worse, like we all carry things with us, and we're all shaped by, our families and what we grew up with and in. So I think the program is a gift, and it's special for me from that personal angle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, how do people reach out to First Call? How do they connect? If we got listeners out there, maybe some might want to volunteer or what, tell us, how do people connect if they want to?
Great. So,
learn more about you?
I mean, first and foremost, our phone number is 816-361-5900, and that's the crisis call line. So
say it again.
816-361-5900. And between, you're going to get a human voice on the other side. And, I guarantee that if someone calls, they're going to feel a little bit better. Even if we don't have the answer, we can offer support and understanding. Our website always has a ton of good information on it, firstcallkc.org. And, I think the biggest thing that we have to work on, and we prioritize as an agency, but any behavioral health organization, is just talking proudly and raising awareness for the work we do, because this isn't someone else's problem. This is every family, every company, every neighborhood has members that are dealing with substance use disorder. We have over 100,000 people dying from drug overdose a year. And the only way out of this is to make it okay, to ask for help, to talk about it, and to reach out. So
I think they're just starting to compile some of the statistics from COVID, at least 2 years or whatever it is. And I think that the death percentage on people dying from substance use stuff, that 2 year period really did skyrocket.
30% in a year.
Is that what it was?
30% increase in a year.
Yeah. Which is a dramatic uptick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see this. We had a staff member in our meeting this morning talking about the time we're hearing about these overdose deaths often is we have a family who's participated in how to cope. And then we're hearing about them at some point afterwards that loved one died from overdose. And it's also a tricky thing because the most of the time it is people who are dealing with a chronic substance use disorder that are dying from a drug overdose. But anymore, it's not just one thing. It's also a kid trying an oxy pill at a party once and it's laced with fentanyl and they die. And so I think that our message needs to be inclusive. Our response needs to be really proactive and making sure our communities have the tools like overdose reversal drugs. Also just talking about the fact that using drugs is more dangerous than ever. Because I think 60-70% of those overdose deaths deal with fentanyl, and it's just so lethal.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how long that's been going on. It seems like maybe 5, maybe not that, maybe 5, 10 years. 5, 10 years.
Yeah, it kind of started. It's been slowly creeping in, particularly with heroin. I think maybe the change we've seen in the past 2 years is now fentanyl is getting mixed with all illicit drugs. So if you use meth, cocaine, you're not immune. And so, you know, there you can buy, and First Call is purchasing fentanyl test strips that someone can test their drug supply before they use to make sure it's not laced with fentanyl. The approaches that we have to take from a public health perspective are, you know, way different to try and deal with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think every community seems like that is the story. And it's really tough. It's a really tough message because ideally someone's not using drugs. But the reality is there's experimentation and recreational use. And so I think it's a tough message as a community to send, is like, if you're going to do drugs, make sure they're safe. But that's where we are, because we also know that if we can deploy some of these harm reduction strategies for people who use drugs, they're 4 times more likely to seek treatment and recovery in the future. And so, but they can't seek out recovery if they're dead. You know? So that's definitely something that First Call's working on, being more proactive in.
Yeah. Wow. So great work that you've committed to. Obviously it's become very important to me, and it's, you know, I'll, you know, God willing, I'll be working in the recovery world, at least a part of what I do for the rest of my life, and have grown to love that world and care deeply for it. So thank you for what you're doing. And I love Kansas City. So I love the recovery world, and I love Kansas City. And so I have a very deep heart for what you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on our podcast and sharing some of your work.
Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk your ear off.
It's great.
I
really enjoyed it. And if there's any way that I can partner with you guys, help in any way, or, you know, let me know.
Absolutely.
I've been sharing my story at different settings and different places and stuff. I've shared it at Core Recovery and Artists Helping Homeless and, Welcome House. I've been, so I still work in that area myself. So
great.
Well, great stuff. Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us at Spirituality Adventures. Emily Hage, CEO of First Call. Thank you so much. Everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.